to Beyond Classified. I'm Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Mike Ricksecker. He is an author and researcher that has appeared on multiple television shows and programs as a paranormal historian. He also produces his own internet supernatural-based shows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel and is the producer and director of the docuseries The Shadow Dimension, which is available on several streaming platforms. He also hosts the Edge of the Rabbit Hole live stream show and the Connecting the Universe interactive class. Haunted Road Media is also his own paranormal and supernatural book publishing and video production company, representing a number of paranormal authors. Mike, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing really well, Chris. Great to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on. You're always a busy man, like we were just discussing, working on and publishing books, television shows, podcasts, your own talk show, and all the research behind all that. And you cover everything from paranormal phenomena, shadow people, UFOs, Alaska Triangle, which we'll get into a little bit today, and all manner of high strangeness. I can't wait to get into our discussion, but it's been a while since you've been on. Remind the audience a little bit about yourself and some of the things you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike Ricksecker, author, researcher, filmmaker. The most recent book that I've published here is Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, came out last year. But piggybacking off of the television show, The Alaska Triangle, that was on Travel Channel. And then most recently here on the History Channel, we had The Unexplained with William Shatner. But this, explores a lot of that strange phenomena that occurs primarily in the what we call the Alaska Triangle. Filmmaker, as far as I have my own docuseries, The Shadow Dimension, which is running free on Tubi TV right now. Roku channel just picked it up, although it's not airing out there yet. I guess it will be out there soon, and a number of other streaming locations. So I have my hands in a lot of different things. Plus, we have the tours. So we're going to Egypt here in a couple of months. In February, we have an Alaska cruise as well, and some other ones that'll be coming up too.
Right on. Also, remind the audience, what kicked all this interest in paranormal and high strangeness off for you and set you off on this path?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, I'm an experiencer. My very first experience was when I was about 8 years old. Woke up in the middle of the night, and there's a tall, dark shadow standing in the corner of my bedroom. And, I had no idea about shadow people, shadow entities, anything like that at the time, which is what this thing was. I just thought there was an intruder in my room and he was about to kill me or something like that. And, but he didn't, which is good, because I'm alive and still able to tell the tale. But he did get physical with me. He had approached my bed, grabbed me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, and then ran off down the hall. And so this was my first significant paranormal experience, but I had many others over the years, other shadow experiences, other things that I'd seen and witnessed. As far as like a lot of the esoteric stuff that I've gotten into, that really started with, well, I've always been interested in history, but in 1993, when the Mysteries of the Sphinx special came out by John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, that had Charlton Heston as the presenter, that absolutely grabbed my attention. And so that sent me down that rabbit hole as well. Then, over the years, just kind of figured out that all this stuff is really interrelated. It's very, very connected to each other, which is why I've come up with what I call the connected universe. And I have an entire learning platform on that now.
Right on. I love that. Yeah, the more I look into this, the deeper the connections go between all this phenomena from shadow people, UFOs, paranormal, aliens. There all seems to be some kind of connection to everything. And I love, it's like an onion you're trying to peel through, and the next layer just leads to more layers and more layers. So I don't know if we'll ever find all the answers, but it's definitely fun trying to get there for sure. Now, since we started talking about shadow people a little bit and your experience. I know we've discussed this before, but I want to get a little deeper into this before we go into the Alaska Triangle. Now, I don't know if I've told you this before. This is something that I've recently been revisiting. I used to have sleep paralysis. This was years ago. This was about maybe 10, maybe almost 12 years ago. And after I was getting out of my, it was a bad marriage. I was going through a divorce, and I was having a tough time with things. And this was before I even thought about starting a talk show and all this stuff like that. And I used to remember just being frozen, partially awake, looking around, kind of being scared that I couldn't move, and then all of a sudden I wouldn't only see like one shadow figure. It'd be like they were having a party in the next room. I'd see like a bunch of people, like just shadows walking down the hallway. It seemed like people were kind of whispering and talking, but they were all in shadow form. And then all of a sudden, I'd hear this like loud banging noise coming from my ceiling, and all I could do is stare up at it, and it'd get louder and louder until I would freak out so much that I'd pop myself out of that situation. Eventually, all that stopped whenever I got myself into a better state of mind. And originally, I thought it was just, the scientific explanation of sleep paralysis. This is just what your brain does whenever you get into this sleep state, and that's all it was. But more recently, after, wonderful researchers like yourself, I've had plenty of other guests that we've discussed sleep paralysis and shadow entities. I've come to believe that there's something much deeper going on with this, and that these may be some sort of intelligences that we're interacting with in a different spectrum or realm that we can't see through, our normal perception. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, shadow people are a lot of different things. And yeah, there is that misnomer that the medical community puts out there that, it's only related to, what they call the intruder effect is only related to sleep paralysis. People see and experiencing these things at all different times of the day. They could be, walking around their house and they see a shadow dart down the hall. People experience them when they're out walking in the woods and they see shadows moving about and this sort of thing. So you can be awake. It could be coming up out of sleep. It could be broad daylight. It could be in a totally different room in the house, the kitchen, wherever. People see and experience these things all different with all different conditions. When it comes to sleep paralysis aspect of it, I believe that this is two different phenomenon that can happen at the same time. So, and I've experienced sleep paralysis a little bit different than you, because most people experience it where they're coming out of sleep and they're still partially paralyzed, which is very natural. It's a natural biological phenomenon. The body will paralyze you while you're sleeping so you don't act out your dreams at night. And sometimes when you wake up, you're still experiencing that paralysis. Some people, it's a little bit more rare, will experience it the other way, where they might be so exhausted that their body shuts down, but their mind is still awake. And this is what's happened to me a couple of times is I was just so exhausted, my body would shut down, but my mind would stay awake. So I was still aware of everything going on around me, but I could not move. I was paralyzed, which is, just as scary. But, a lot of people will experience this, at night in bed, they see the shadow person. But for one, like I already said, we experience this multiple different times per day. The second thing is, we dream about a lot of different things. The medical community is trying to say that these are just hallucinations that are coming out of our dreams as we're waking up. And it's like, well, why is it always a person? Because that's what people, you had a whole bunch of people, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But, we dream about a lot of different things. There could be trees and bushes in our dreams. There could be trains, planes flying overhead, things like that. I've had dreams of being on stage with Motley Crue, and I've never woken up to, 10,000 people in my room, and the pyrotechnics going off and the drum kit, and all that would be awesome. It'd be a lot of fun, but that doesn't happen. People wake up and they see a person, or like multiple people there. So I think what's happening here in these cases is that we're feeling their presence. We're feeling their energy. And anybody who's had small children will understand this, where a small child wakes up in the middle of the night, they've had a bad dream, they need to use the restroom, get a glass of water, whatever. Usually they come up to the bed, tap you on the shoulder, wake you up, and you're like, oh, okay, let's go take care of it. But sometimes you end up with that child, and my youngest son, Cameron, was notorious for this. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder or shake you awake. They just stand there at the bed and they just stare at you, which is really creepy, because you wake up, you're like, oh my God, Cameron, what are you doing? And he'll say, I had a bad dream, or I need some water. Okay, we'll go take care of that.
Yeah.
But if he didn't tap me or wake me up, what is it that woke me up? And what it is we each have a toroidal field of energy that surrounds us, that extends out several feet. And, basically when his energy crossed into mine, I was able to feel his presence. I was able to feel his energy, and that woke me up, and we took care of the things that he needed to take care of. So I think that's what's happening with these shadow beings, is that we're feeling their energy, we're feeling their presence in the room. That wakes us up, and we're going through the whole natural biological process of coming out of sleep. And sometimes we have that paralysis. Some people report not even feeling the paralysis. They see the thing standing there and they're not even paralyzed, but other people will feel the paralysis. But I think that's two different things happening at the same time here. The supernatural, paranormal, whatever you want to call it, shadow entity phenomena, and then the sleep paralysis.
Now, this is kind of off topic, but it's in the same similar realms. A few years ago, I remember I was dreaming, and it was a dream that it was like a home invasion, and I was sleeping next to my girlfriend at the time, and she was in my dream. And in the dream, we were both being tied up by these home invaders in chairs and, putting blindfolds on us. And all of a sudden, in my dream, the home invaders started pouring, like waterboarding us, pouring water over our heads.
Wow.
And at the same time, seemingly, my girlfriend had spilled water right over my face, trying to reach over and grab a glass of water. So, like, I woke up in this terrified state, not knowing what's going on. I thought, like, I was really being waterboarded and drowned by home invaders. And then I'm coming to, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that." But the way it all came together, and seemingly, like, my dream led up to it, it was very interesting. I just want to get your thoughts on the possibilities there.
Yeah, it almost sounds like, and of course, I didn't experience, so I wasn't in the situation, but
Mm.
it sounds like, because of what your girlfriend did, your mind, because you were actively dreaming at the time, interpreted the feeling of the wet sensation, the water being, poured onto you. It reinterpreted that into the dream as the waterboarding.
Mm.
But sometimes, yeah, I've done classes and things like this on dreams, premonitions. Those things really happen. We actually will get dream visitations from loved ones that have passed. So there's a lot of interesting things that happen within our dream state.
Yeah, man, that's super interesting. Now, while we're in these realms of dream states, I want to talk a little bit about what people could possibly be experiencing during astral experiences, out of body experiences. Some people actively go and they seek exploration in these astral realms, and they have techniques of knowing how to exit their body in a certain way, and they actually come into contact with some of these entities, not only shadow entities, but multiple different types. And I'm wondering if you think that through the astral travel, through these out of body experiences, that we're actually, our consciousness is accessing these realms that possibly these beings could be originated from.
Quite possibly, these other beings. I think what a quote unquote true shadow person is an interdimensional being coming from some other plane of existence. And by definition, the astral plane is another plane of existence. So some of these things could be on that plane. And yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about when they go and they travel, not only do they seek out um, loved ones and visiting different locations. And I think some of these different shadow people that people witness, are actually astral projections of, maybe a grandmother or whatever knows how to astral project and lives far away from her daughter and her granddaughter and goes to visit them at night and appears in the room if the person happens to wake up as a shadow, or you hear like a visage of a shimmer type person and this sort of thing. So that could actually be somebody astral projecting. But people do report that they will see other beings there as well. And so I've had that question come up, where somebody's like, I've seen these shadow beings in the astral plane, and coming back into my room, and there's the shadow person standing there, and they're wondering, is that shadow person trying to get into my body, that sort of thing, because people. There's this kind of misnomer of like all shadow entities are dark and evil and nefarious, and they're not. There are a large variety of different types of shadow entities with different agendas, just like people. Uh, so some of them, they could be, people talk about spirit guides. They could be
Mm-hmm.
something like that. They could be, maybe they are the visage of a loved one that's just looking in on you, and you're only, because everything comes down to personal resonance, energy, vibration, that sort of thing. And so if things aren't quite vibrating on the right frequency, you might not see it clearly. So it could be something like a loved one, or it could just be something else entirely that we're really not aware of who or what they are.
Right on. Now, while we're talking about possible intelligent manifestations, I'm very curious and very interested about what we're seeing with orbs, and not necessarily just orbs that we see with pictures and photography that could possibly be dust, but the ones that actually manifest in front of us and seemingly have some kind of intelligent aspect to them. And I've seen some pretty compelling pictures where the orbs actually look like they have like faces and things like that in them. And I want to get your take on what this phenomena could be. And do you think that it is something that is not just like dust manifesting on a lens or something like that?
Yeah, and a lot of them are dust like that.
Mm.
Probably 90 to 95% of the photos that people send my way. Oh, look, I caught all these spirit orbs, and it's like, no, it's dust. I've even done this. We did this years ago for a presentation that we did when I was investigating out in Oklahoma, and trying to dispel the whole dust orb thing. We had been at an old tuberculosis asylum. One floor is really dusty. We kicked a bunch up in the air, took a photo with the flash, created all these orbs, and we're showing people during the presentation, look, this is a dust storm, but it's looking like all these different orbs. And people insisted, no, 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 that's just you. You don't know that could be like a bunch of spirits. And it's like, no, we purposely kicked up the dust to take the photo. But some people are really, really insistent that this dust is spirit phenomena. But the legitimate ones. Because I have a really fascinating photo from this Black Bear Church out in Oklahoma. It's an old abandoned church out in the middle of nowhere. And walk in the building for the first time, and boom, there's this ball of light. And I took a photo of it, and it's really a bright illuminated ball of light. So what was that? These can be a lot of different things. Are they spirit phenomena? Possibly. Is it ball lightning? That's another possibility. Could it be some sort of plasma effect? That's also possible. Andrew Collins he came out with Origins of the Gods. I think it was earlier this year, and he really kind of dove down into the whole idea of this plasma phenomenon. And then the question becomes, if there is plasma that's being generated basically out of, again, another plane of existence, who or what actually lives within that plasma? Are there different organisms and life forms and things like that within it? So you have a lot of different possibilities as to who or what they could be. Even the idea of fairy phenomena, which people are going to call me crazy. I have seen, and I can't for sure say it was a quote unquote fairy or whatever, but it was different orb-like lighting effects. One which was a yellow illuminated ball of light that was transformative. Because at one point the thing had gotten onto the floor and became just this little pinprick of light that was on the floor that had like a little V shape coming out from the backside of it. And then, as I'm looking, starts to flutter like this. And then boom, it was that, illuminated yellow ball of light again that was, dancing around. Another time it was at Hinsdale in New York, all these little blue lights coming down out of the woods. And people say, well, it could be some sort of firefly. Well, for one, it was late September. It was not firefly season. And two, blue ones, which do exist, are not. They don't exist in New York. They're like down in the Carolinas and only come out during June. So it wasn't that. Plus, we were getting right down there on the ground because the lights are either on the ground or some of them were in the air. We're looking for our flashlights. There's no insects or anything like that. So what is this? Was it quote unquote fairies, or was it something else that was coming off looking like these little pinpricks of like these little orbs?
There's so much of this phenomenon, paranormal or even ufology, all these things that we're discussing that seem to have not only a collective intelligence, but like a trickster aspect to it, to where it's always like 10 steps ahead of the observer. And as an example, things like Skinwalker Ranch and these places of high strangeness that we have aerospace companies going and investigate. We have
Mhm.
three-letter agencies, and from what we understand, they always come back with more questions and answers.
Yeah.
And this phenomena seems to like toy with people at times and lead them in certain directions. And it seems to have this trickster aspect to it. And I want to get your thoughts on that. If this could be some kind of just grand intelligence that splits itself off into different phenomenon depending on which individual is interacting with it.
Yeah, it's always possible. You asked me about orbs there a moment ago, and you look back at the Foo Fighters from World War II. Those were some sort of orb, illuminated ball of light, or whatever, that were basically chasing, and the fighters at the time, both on the Axis and the Allied side. They had no idea what they were, and they did seem very treacherous in nature because they're trying to outmaneuver these things, and they couldn't get away from them. They're still following them. So it was really really bizarre activity. And so is it something that's trying to trick us, or in that particular case, was it something that was curious? Was it something
Mm.
coming from another plane of existence? See these World War II fighters and bombers flying in the air. They're like, what the heck are these things? Let's go take a look. And as those planes are trying to outmaneuver these balls of light, the curious ball of light could be like, no, 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 don't run away. I want to see what you are.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, if we develop some sort of technology where we were able to go to some other dimension or some other world or what have you, and all of a sudden we're seeing all these different new objects that we've never seen before, we're going to want to inspect that. We're going to want to check it out. And so, if it's starting to move away from us, we might be like, oh, no, 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 don't. I want to learn more about you. I want to see more of what this is that I'm seeing here. So it just might be curious in nature, and we interpret it as being tricksterish because we don't understand it.
Right.
But there are ones, that do in some cases seem, because we have these different myths and legend and lore I mentioned before, like the fairies, because there's a lot of like, um, fairy lore myths about them being tricksters and bringing people into their own dimension and putting out a changeling to kind of trick people and things like that, or like the jinn, supposed to be very tricksterous in nature. So we have these different legends and lore surrounding these different types of entities, and I think that's humans trying to make sense of something we don't quite understand.
Now, before we get to your work with the Alaska Triangle, I want to get your thoughts on the possibilities of us attracting these entities with our own negative energy, behaviors, maybe possibly illicit substances. I know for me that whenever I was in a bad state of mind, when I was going through my divorce and things were kind of depressive for me, that's when this high strangeness started manifesting in my life. And I've spoken with plenty of others that have had similar situations to where either they're going through a bad time in their life, or they're using some kind of substances that are possibly attracting this strange energy to them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, anytime you're going through something like that, your body chemistry is changing. And so I mentioned before, it all comes down to, energy, resonance, vibration, frequency, all of that. And so when you're going through these different moments of your life, or like you said, using some different substances, you're changing that frequency, resonance, and vibration of yourself going through those different states. So when that happens, you may actually get yourself onto a different wavelength that either maybe one attracts some of these different entities, or two makes it possible so that you can see some of them. So like the human body operates within a certain frequency range. It's about what is it, 9 to 16 hertz, somewhere in there, but everybody's a little bit different. And of course, these different entities themselves are operating on their own different frequency and a different range. And so I think what happens is when we momentarily get on the same frequency range, we're able to see some of these different things. So when you're going through these different moments in your life, and your body is going through these different changes, and you're resonating at a little bit of a different level, you're able to see different things than you were able to before.
Right on. Now let's talk about your book, The Alaska Triangle. What got you looking into this particular topic?
Yeah, well, I spent 3 years in Alaska as part of when I was a member of the United States Air Force from 1992 to 1995. Yeah, but I say that, but that's not really what kind of dove me down that rabbit hole. I did have experiences. I saw a lot of different things up there. It's a strange, kind of a strange country, or part of the country, really. And really what it was is, so I had on my YouTube channel, I'd had some videos out there on portals and portal activity and things like that, uh, Earth energy and what have you. And so the producers of the television show, The Alaska Triangle, had approached me basically to ask me about portal phenomena. So, we're getting to talking, having conversation and all that. And so then they asked me, well, what do you know about this type of activity in Alaska? And so I was like, oh, you must be talking about the Alaska Triangle, because I was familiar with it, of course, from my days up there in Alaska. And they're like, that's the title of our show. I'm like, okay, great. So we started talking about that, and then we connected, to film some episodes, and it was just really natural for me, being a writer, to just, okay, this is a really interesting area of the country with a lot of phenomena that has been occurring. I've now acquired a whole bunch of information that I didn't have back in the 90s, that I could put together in a book. And so that became a whole new research project for me. And yeah, I was able to get that out just before, no, it was just after season 2 had started.
Right on. Maybe we could go over some of your favorite or most profound
Mhm.
cases that really stick out for you, or occurrences from the Alaska Triangle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the big thing with any of these triangle areas around the world, which there are many, there's Alaska, of course, Bermuda's the most famous one, Dragon Triangle out there in Japan. There's Lake Michigan one, Bridgewater in Massachusetts. They're all over. Even just recently discovered this past summer when I was in Ireland that there's actually a triangle there as well. Uh, and really, what's occurring is a lot of strange phenomena based on a number of different factors. You have the magnetism of the Earth, you have seismic activity, volcanic activity. Of course, it's getting pelted by the solar flares, which is where we get the auroras. But you have a lot of these, strange disappearances. You have a lot of supernatural activity. You have a lot more UFO activity. I think one of the, and it's sad to say favorite, when you talk about disappearances, but talk a lot about the missing Douglas Skymaster from 1950. Totally bizarre case. Happened in January, but it was a relatively nice day. It was just uh, flying out of Alaska, and as it crossed over into Yukon territory, into Canada, all of a sudden just completely disappeared around the snag area. Everything had been fine. Last transmission from them, everything was good, and just poof, it's gone. They launched a massive search and rescue mission. Thousands and thousands of troops have been deployed, both on the U.S. and Canada side. They were actually supposed to be doing some exercises at the time together, some joint exercises, which they stopped, and they went looking for the plane. What's interesting is that just a few weeks later, there was another plane that had actually gone down in that same area, a smaller plane, and they were able to find that immediately. But this much larger Douglas Skymaster, nothing was ever found. Uh, Also, there were reports just before and just after the disappearance of UFO activity. So that was also interesting. So some people believe that that UFOs had played a part in the Skymaster's disappearance. There's also a number of people who believe that the Skymaster had disappeared into some sort of portal, ended up maybe in another dimension, another point in time. And I like to think of, if it did disappear into another point in time, that maybe it went back into the past. And I just throw out a number. Let's say 500 years or so. And if it appears in that other point in time, well, what would it look like to, say, the indigenous people of the area at that time? They're looking up in the sky, and all of a sudden there's this massive airplane. They have no context of what an airplane is. They only know that birds fly in the sky. So is that where we get like some of these Thunderbird legends from? Is because maybe some of these airplanes that have disappeared have reappeared back in the past. And that's where some of these, legends come from.
That's super interesting. And not only planes have disappeared, but lots of sea vessels and ships, right?
Yeah, you have, well, there's been a lot of maritime accidents up there. You have the ghost ships, things like that. The Bechamo ghost ship, which keeps appearing and reappearing. We haven't seen it now for a couple of decades, but it was abandoned in the 1930s. They thought it was going to be unfit to sail because it crashed into the ice, and they were able to unstick it, and then it crashed again into the ice. And so they ended up abandoning the vessel, and basically it was floating around, appearing and disappearing for up until the 1960s was the last time that it actually been seen. And people would actually get on board the thing, and then all of a sudden they'd get trapped by some freak storm that would come out of nowhere, and they'd be like, okay, we're not going to do that again. And they'd leave the ship. But then you have like the SS Princess Sophia, which they call the Alaska Titanic. This had an unfortunate accident in 1918. And basically, it was the last voyage of the season, had a lot of like 300 some odd people on board, more than it usually carried because of the new, it's kind of sad to think about, but because of the new safety regulations coming out of the Titanic, they had to, all the vessels were required to retrofit with new different safety measures, more safety belts, things like this. And so then they were allowed to actually bring more people on board. So it had more than it usually did beforehand. And what was strange about this accident, as it was coming down out of Skagway, headed toward Juneau and then Vancouver, is the captain of the ship. Now he had done this voyage hundreds of times. He knew this route by like the back of his hand. And when you get into the Lynn Canal, there's a reef right in the middle called the Vanderbilt Reef. He knows where it's at, and he would say that you need to keep to the one side of it, between the reef and the other bank. But yet somehow coming down, he ended up right on top of it. And what happened was, and you see this a lot with these triangle areas where a freak storm will come out of nowhere and endanger the people. Like with Flight 19 in Bermuda, all of a sudden their compasses and navigational equipment went crazy, and then a freak storm came out of nowhere and they disappeared. With the Princess Sophia, freak storm comes out of nowhere. There's zero visibility. All they have to rely on is their guidance system, their compasses, and yet somehow they still ended up on this reef, which people speculate, well, maybe the power of the Alaska Triangle, the electromagnetism, was interfering with their navigational equipment, which is why they ended up on the reef. And unfortunately, because of the storm, it just kept pounding and pounding and pounding. The rescue ships could not get over there because of the storm, and eventually the ship was ripped off the reef and sank, and everybody perished except for one dog.
Oh, wow. Now, has there been any scientific or independent studies done in these areas, like we see aerospace companies doing at Skinwalker Ranch and the Meadow and other places of high strangeness? Do you know if there's been any kind of professional investigations into this?
Well, we have to go back to, like, when it comes to Alaska, you have to go back to 1965. The U.S. Department of the Interior did a survey of the electromagnetic properties of the area. And, Alaska is over 600,000 square miles. It's massive. It's 2.5 times the size of Texas. So they were only able to do their survey within about 100,000 square miles, which still, that's a pretty big area. And they detected what they called 5 distinct magnetic characteristics of this area. And several of those they described as negative anomalies that would cause various activity in the area. And I believe this is why they built HARP up there. One of the reasons why they built it. It's a very remote area. You have the thinner ionosphere there. which is, or the thinner magnetic shield up there. So they're able to do more testing with the ionosphere because of that, which is, where we get the auroras at. But also, I believe that they were harnessing the magnetic properties of Alaska. It's very, very significant what we see up there. And with the government already having done their research up there into that electromagnetism, they were able to build some of these different facilities like that.
What do you think of the possibilities of underwater either life forms or civilizations that could be associated with this? We've seen in the past few years amazing footage of UAPs that are the USOs is what they're calling those, where these objects will penetrate the water at such a high speed and not have your typical effect that you'd expect on the water, and all these incredible speeds that we're seeing there. Do you think that there could be some sort of underwater civilization associated with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, specifically when it comes to the Alaska Triangle, there are a lot of reports that come from the area of Alaska, even from our military. The Navy has had several sightings of USOs of crafts coming out of the water, or more of the UAP phenomena, like the light anomalies coming out of the water and things like this. That's quite prevalent up there, and Alaska has a lot of water. So the coastline of Alaska equates to more than the rest of the United States combined. They also have, we talk about Minnesota being the land of 10,000 lakes. Well, Alaska has 3 million. So there are a lot of places there where things could be hiding, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a very remote area of the world. So they could be hiding in the mountain ranges. You hear about these entities in, like, at Mount Hayes. They could be hiding in the water up there. A lot of different things could be going on, and also elsewhere, around the world and around the country. I know there's a lot of reports out of, like, the San Diego area offshore, where people have seen this phenomenon coming in and out of the water. So and it makes a lot of sense. If they have that technology to be able to live and adapt underwater, or build some sort of colony down there, it would be hidden and out of the way of prying eyes. Because we have, with all of our technology, we've only mapped a very, very small percentage of our seas. It gets very, very deep and hard to be able to penetrate down there. You'll hear reports a lot of times of scientists had investigated some area and discovered new marine life. So we're still discovering things down there. It's still an uncharted area.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to be discovered there and underground as well. Going back to places like Skinwalker Ranch, the aerospace companies and certain three-letter agencies and government interests in there, they're not necessarily going out there and looking to the skies, although there is a lot of strange phenomena and UFOs that are occurring in the skies. But these places are mainly looking underground for anomalies. They're looking for magnetic anomalies and strange occurrences, and I think that there is something to that. I think that under the surface or inside mountain ranges is a place that a lot of exploration should be done, and I think we could get a lot more answers if we start doing things like looking underground and looking underwater.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically with Skinwalker, yeah, they've seen a lot of phenomena in the skies there, but they're attributing a lot of that to the strange magnetic characteristics that are coming out of the ground there. So I think it goes back to, it's one of these areas, you have that magnetism of the Earth's core that's rising up out of the ground, and it's interacting with different metals, minerals, water, things like this as it's coming up through the Earth's crust. And depending on what's there in the ground, it's going to create a lot of this different type of activity. So, but yeah, when it comes to, like, the American Southwest, some of these different areas and things that are going on within the ground, people talk about not necessarily hollow earth, but large cavernous areas within the ground, like hollow areas within the ground, in which you could have, civilizations that are living down there. You have stories of, like, the ant people from some of your Native American legends that basically during the cataclysm, people were brought underground by the ant. People lived there until the cataclysm had subsided, and then they came back on up ground to the surface. So where were those areas? What were those living conditions like? But then you look at like other areas like Kuyu. Here's this massive cave system in which people were living underground for, and it seems at different points in time, not just once, but over the millennia, several different times it was used by different people. So do we have other things like that under the ground, maybe here in the United States? I absolutely believe so.
Yeah. It makes me wonder how much our governments and black projects and three-letter agencies really know about this. I mean, we know for a very long time they've been looking into things and actually implementing things like remote viewing, telekinesis, PSI phenomenon, and all these kind of high, strange, woo-woo things that our government has actually been involved with and probably still are in many aspects. But it makes me wonder how much they actually have discovered about things having to do with this particular phenomenon, because we know that they have been looking into it, and I personally think they know a lot more than they would ever let on. What do you think?
Oh yeah, they always know a lot more than they're letting on. They have a lot of technology. They keep a lot of things safeguarded. There's certain areas of the country that people would like to visit and can't because all of a sudden it's been cordoned off. Like there's an area there over by the Grand Canyon that's sectioned off by NASA. What's NASA doing out there at the Grand Canyon? It's totally bizarre. But you have areas like this of the country where all of a sudden you can't get to because there's a government or a military presence. And so, yeah, there's a lot more going on that they're aware of. You mentioned like the remote viewing, Project Stargate, which was that's the name that was given to it in the early 90s, but it was actually several different projects over the year. But recently, it came out of the Stanford Research Institute. And you had a lot of very good remote viewers within that project that discovered a lot of different things. And they're very, very good at it. And that's where we get like the stories of Pat Price remote viewing into Mount Hayes and things like that. And you kind of almost have to take his word for it, because some of the things that he did remote view of, whether it was out in Russia or even some of the things like when he was first being tested, he had remote viewed something in Virginia that was, turned out to be a government facility that, CIA came back and said, hey, what's this going on over here? And is he some sort of spy? It's like, we're just doing our remote viewing testing. So when, he remote views Mount Hayes, and he has all these other things different going on that he's able to view, and all of a sudden he has a very strange death in Las Vegas after just visiting the NSA, and it was a Navy defense organization, goes to Vegas, and all of a sudden mysteriously dies that night after dinner, and his body is immediately cremated before his wife is able even to get onto the scene. It's just totally bizarre.
Now, I want to get into portals a bit. I know that you were at, I think it was the 2021 Laughlin UFO conference. We hung out there. We had a great time. And I don't know if you probably did, if you saw Trey Hudson's presentation about the Meadow. And this was an amazing presentation, especially the video footage that he showed of his team seemingly interacting with what could have possibly been a portal. I don't know if you remember this. He sent his team out to investigate this, I don't know how big it was, but a massive black manifestation of what appeared to be this cube in the Meadow, and his team actually were able to enter this, and on the infrared camera, you could see that they were actually no longer putting off a heat signature whenever they went into this, and they were very disoriented upon entry. They had a temperature drop. Seemingly, their surroundings changed, and they had to backtrack to exit out of this portal. And this was probably the most compelling thing I've ever seen when it comes to evidence of this stuff. But for you, have you come across any other profound evidence or stories or tales about portals?
Yeah, well, NASA admits that they have detected a portal They call it an X point, just outside of Earth, and basically is that area in which the solar flares from the Earth, the solar wind, interacts with our magnetic shield, and so they say that there is a portal there that is opening and closing, and they don't know where it goes, but it's there. And there was just a article that I posted, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where in the lab they created a very, very small, what they're calling a wormhole. So this is something that our science is very interested in developing. Of course, for long term, that's probably going to be the way that we're going to have to travel around the cosmos, is through some sort of portal, wormhole, Stargate sort of thing. But they do exist here, on Earth. And we mentioned it before, talked a little bit about it before with the Douglas Skymaster. Could it have traveled through a portal? Bruce Gernon, who had his experience there in the Bermuda Triangle, he described his experience with this as like an electronic fog. And when it basically formed a tunnel in front of his airplane as he was flying through it, and all of a sudden came out on the other side, and the city of Miami was below him. And Miami wasn't supposed to show up under him for another hour and a half, and yet it had been 3 minutes, and there it is. So some sort of portal that had jumped him ahead in time. So there are these things around the world that people are able to interact with. And I think that's where we get a lot of our strange stories about different encounters where people have missing time, or maybe there's some sort of creature or entity that comes out of these that they are able to interact with. So yeah, I'm familiar with Trey's work there on that.
Yeah. Now you mentioned creatures that people have interacted with. I know you've done some research into the high strange creatures surrounding the Alaska Triangle and in that area in the north. What are some of the crazy cryptids that you have researched?
Well, I mean, when it comes to Alaska specifically, of course, they have Sasquatch sightings up there. They have what they call the Kushtaka, which is basically a half man, half otter type entity, which is really kind of reminiscent of the Wendigo type tales, where they kind of lure people out into the woods, and either they kill the person and eat them.
Now, did you say half man, half otter? I'm just trying to picture
half man,
this.
half otter. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, half man, half otter. They either kill and eat the person, or they turn them into another Kushtaka, which is what happens with Wendigo. They're either going to eat them, or they're going to turn them into another Wendigo. So yeah, a lot of interesting tales like that, or like the Lake Iliamna monster, which is kind of reminiscent of Loch Ness and things like that. So it seems like every area has their different legends and creatures and superstitions and things like that. And I always say that there's a grain of truth to all of this. And I was just mentioning it the other day on my show, or my Connecting the Universe class. We were doing a year end, and I had highlighted a book by Gregory Forth. It's called Between Ape and Man. Now, he's an anthropologist. This is somebody from the scientific field. And when you're reading this book, it's like, wait a second. He's talked about cryptids on these islands in the South Pacific, over by the island of Flores. It's here's an anthropologist talking about this. So it's like, okay, here's somebody from the scientific community that's saying, wait a second, there is something to all of these stories that people are talking about.
Now, what are your thoughts on some of these cryptids like Bigfoot? There is a ton of different theories about what this being could be. Some think it's just a lost hominid, but there's evidence that there's much more to this. Evidence that it's been associated with things like portals and disappearing into thin air and having consciousness abilities, being able to communicate psychically. And I've also had very compelling testimony from guests that say that they've not only had encounters with Bigfoot, but Bigfoot interacting with a dog man and then having psychic communication amongst all three. So there's some very strange stuff going on with this. Do you think that these beings are physical in some aspect, and that they just have the ability to phase in and out of our reality, our dimension, that they might have these abilities to interact with a state of matter that we don't understand to actually manifest between these realms?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of different theories, and you kind of rattled off a whole bunch of them right
Yeah.
there. I think there is a physicality, too, because people do, physically see these things with their eyes. We have seen some of the prints and things like that. Could they be a lost hominid? Very, very possibly. Are they related to the giants? Possibly. There are stories of, even other types of creatures like the woolly mammoth that, there could be small pockets of them still stashed away up in Alaska somewhere, because it's so remote and there's many places that are unexplored. Are they hiding in these areas? And, same thing with Sasquatch, they could be in some of these very remote areas and other locations where it's very, very hard to explore. But then, yeah, you have the ideas of are they actually some sort of interdimensional being or some sort of ET or some sort of ultra terrestrial that are coming into our plane of existence through maybe some sort of portal? Because you have a lot of these people that, just for instance, we're talking about disappearances and things like that before. You have a lot of people that disappear out into the wilderness, and some people say, the Sasquatch got them. Some people just legitimately get lost in the woods. But then you have others that say, well, I was on that actually get found or find their way back finally. That will say, well, I was on the path, I was on the trail, and I heard a sound off to the side, and I took 2 steps off the path to see what in the world was making the sound. Didn't see anything, didn't find anything. Turn around to get back on the path, and the path is gone. All of a sudden they're lost in the woods after just taking 2 steps off of the path. What in the world happened? And it's almost like they got, they stepped into some sort of portal. Maybe they got teleported somewhere. Is that how, if this is happening to humans, is that how some of these different creatures like Sasquatch are moving around? Are they moving through portals? Or do they have some sort of technology that they're able to teleport from one location to another? If human beings that are getting lost in the woods are describing this same sort of phenomena as how they got lost.
Right. Now, I'd love to get your thoughts on the last few minutes. We have a couple of different things. First, on what's been coming out in our mainstream media and from levels of our government and the Pentagon and military about UFOs. Seemingly, they are painting this as that they're concerned that this could be a threat to national security, which, there are aspects of that make sense. But the biggest thing to me is if these things have been around as long as we've been around and they wanted to destroy us, it seems like they could have done it 1,000 times over in many different ways. So I'm not sure if that's what's going on, but there are interesting aspects that are coming out right now, and it makes me wonder if we are just trying to roll out some technology that we have already, if we're just trying to get ahead of information that will be coming out that would be detrimental to our government if the masses found out and it wasn't revealed through that direct source. I don't know. What do you think could possibly be behind this mainstream disclosure?
Yeah. First of all, I do want to say that back in June during that UAP hearing, that Mike Gallagher became my new favorite congressman. The way he was grilling those guys, Bray and what was his name, Mulry. They had like no clue about the Maelstrom case. It's like, how can you guys be representatives of these organizations and not know a thing about the Maelstrom case? And Gallagher called them out on that, which was great. So for one, it's great that we're talking about it now. For years and years and years, for decades, they just did not want to talk about it at all. It was like they ended Blue Book and they said that was it, and we knew there was a lot more to the story. I mean, 701 cases were still open from Blue Book, but they tried to just toss it under the rug and say no, we're done with it. But I think the technology that's gotten into the common person's hands through like our cell phones, our cameras, things like that, we are able to record, in fairly good detail these days, things that are happening in the skies, in the air, and now you have these, releases of some of the Navy footage and things like that. So they can no longer just sit back and just deny. Oh, nothing's going on, and come up with little excuses for what's happening. They have to at least admit something, and so And so this is kind of like the first baby step into, actually, admitting and disclosing something. But I think they're still trying to frame it in a way that will take us off the scent of what's really going on. Is some of it, you know, uh, our own technology that we are witnessing things that the United States government is developing? Yeah, sure. I mean, we've seen that happen in the past. The idea that they're in some ways they're trying to scare us. They're saying, well, this could be an enemy's technology that is, entering into our airspace. Well, I mean, while that's possible, I just really don't think that's the case. But I think they use that as a scare tactic, so it throws us off the scent. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's of course that's a logical explanation. Could be some sort of enemy. Well, okay, fine. If that's an enemy that's doing that, that's an act of war. So there would be some sort of retaliation to that if it was some other foreign power that was putting things in our airspace like that. So so no, I don't think that all of these other ones that are not us, are a foreign power. I think it's something to throw us off the scent. But it's the first baby step, and we, collectively, will still have to try to do our best to really get to the root of what's going on there. I do think it's something, whether it's ET or ultra terrestrial from some other dimension. Something's going on out there for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited about the times we're in. All the wonderful researchers like yourself that are connecting these different types of phenomenon from ufology and the connection to our consciousness and the spirit realms and all these fantastic things. Before you head out, Mike, tell us about what you're doing with the Connecting the Universe class.
Yeah, absolutely. Connecting the Universe. That's my weekly class on Wednesdays. We just had our last one for the year. This past Wednesday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So it's part of the Connected Universe portal, which is a greater encompassing learning platform. So Connecting the Universe is our weekly class, but then there's all kinds of other stuff on the back end, like all kinds of articles. You have behind the scenes sneak peek videos. You have monthly Q&A videos. I have a morning mug video where it's just me taking a topic and kind of running with it, or maybe doing something a little off color. It's a wonderful learning platform that people can come, interact, learn a lot, ask questions, kind of have those conversations, and invite people out to connecteduniverseportal.com.
Excellent. Well, Mike, this was fantastic. We'll definitely have to do it again soon. Before you head out, let everyone know where they can find your channel, website, everything you got going on, social media, all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, connecteduniverseportal.com. Also, MikeRicksecker.com. That's my official website, where you can find all my books and everything. You can find information about the tours out there, Egypt, Alaska, all of that. I do have my own YouTube channel, social media. You can find me, Mike Ricksecker, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all those wonderful places.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Mike. And like I said, we'll do it again soon. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.